Yo, what's good with it? It's your homie Mac, music, art, culture, knowledge, reporting live from the Dogon. Um, like, share, comment, subscribe. The goal is to get what at least 1,000 subscribers or better by the end of 2020. It's still 2019, but I try to set goals early and get it popping, get it moving. But yeah, um, like, share, comment, like the YouTube channel 82 Kings. Subscribe to the YouTube channel 82 Kings. If there's anything that you would like for me to discuss, let me know. We can definitely do that. It's not a problem. Um, as long as it makes sense, it has to make sense and fit into the narrative of the podcast. But let's get to it. I want to talk about Nipsey Hussle and the eulogy that Farrakhan did for Nipsey Hussle. And there's a point there's a point within the eulogy that Farrakhan speaks of the mark of the beast, and he breaks down the numbers, the metaphysics of the number six, and correlates that to how Nipsey was a rolling 60. But one of the things that he talks about is pretty much how he said Nipsey and a lot of people from his community, and not even just from not just from the Crenshaw district, Nipsey's hood, but just people in general from all hoods, ghettos across the world. How a lot of times you have what essentially is the mark of the beast, but he's not saying necessarily you have the mark of the beast on your body, but you have the mark of the beast in your head and your mind, and you use your limbs, your hands to carry out a lot of things that are devious and that are destructive and evil. And he was saying how Nipsey had that mark, but he rose from the mark of the beast and became a man, a spiritual man, a strong man, and he completely overcame his lower self or transitioned out of his lower self. I'm not sure if anyone ever completely just cuts off their lower self. I think it's a daily struggle, but he spoke to the fact that Nipsey transitioned to a place where he was functioning more from his higher self. Now, let's get to it. The Crenshaw district, people know South Central LA or South LA. They like to call it South LA now because it's becoming more and more gentrified. That area is essentially a war zone. There's a lot of crime. There's a lot of gang violence. There's a lot of just violence in general, not just gang violence. But I'm not saying these things to debase that community or disrespect that community, because that community is an archetypal image. That community is represented so many different places. There's so many places throughout the world that are similar. But what I'm saying is, you got a lot of people that live in those communities and they're functioning in their lower self, and they don't transition and become, grow into their higher self and become more spiritually minded. Now, you know, you could be listening right now and be like, Maurice, what the heck is lower self? What's higher self? Like, bro, what you talking about? Basically, lower self and higher self. Um, these dynamics are mentioned in a lot of different ways, but my point of reference is the things that I learned in Christianity, and things that I learned from the Moorish Science Temple of America, and things I learned from reading Friedrich Nietzsche, specifically his book The Will to Power, the Uberman theory, and Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Those are books that or the philosophies of Friedrich Nietzsche, but it all connects. I'm gonna make it connect. I know I just went like, dude, you went from Farrakhan to Jesus, and now you talking about Friedrich Nietzsche. I'm gonna make it all connect. But basically, lower self uh, is the dynamics. You know how they always say you may have like an angel on this side, and you got a devil on the other side. And I guess essentially you could say that the lower self is the devil side that's whispering in your ear. Lower self is basically something. Lower self is rooted in fear, rooted in ego, laziness, just things that are destructive, things that are just totally counterproductive to growth. Lower self actually restricts you. It makes you contract in. Again, a lot of it's fear, ego, just things that are non-productive. Whereas like higher self is love, higher self is compassion, higher self is peace, higher self is serving others, higher self is loving yourself. Higher self consists of things that lead to growth, things that lead to expanding your mind frame, things that widen your lens to the world. The thing is like the question is well, how do you overcome your lower self? How do you function more so from your higher self? Um, Wait, but before I go there, let me correlate it to what I was saying about Christianity and what I was saying about Nietzsche. I just the reference I gave you now for higher self and lower self is more so rooted in Moorish Science Temple. Um, but higher self from a Christian standpoint is being spiritually minded, not as the elders in the church would say, not not being a slave to your flesh. Your flesh being your carnal desires, your sinful desires. That's lower self within the church. Higher self within the church is functioning out of love, functioning in the spirit, not being a slave to your flesh, not being a slave to carnality. Again, higher self, love, peace, sharing, giving, serving. Um, in context of Nietzsche, Nietzsche essentially would say, well, the higher self is the Übermensch, or what would be translated to Superman in English. We know Nietzsche was a German philosopher, but his concept was called the Übermensch theory, the Uberman theory. I'll put a link to some of his books so you can look at it or whatever. But yeah, the Uberman theory is basically the person that man or that woman who has transcended their desires of the flesh, their desires of their lower self. The Uberman is high minded in principles, is high minded in thought, high minded in action, is not petty. They have the Uberman essentially has conquered self, daily conquered self. In the church, they always say you got to renew your mind and renew your spirit daily to overcome your lower self. That's true. That's true. There's a lot of truth in that. The spirit and the flesh are always going to be at odds with each other. The lower self and the higher self will always be in war with each other. That's the dialectic that exists, the yin and yang that exists in all of us. No one's going to always be in their higher self. No one's going to always be in their lower self. But I think you can daily strive to be the best self, to be the higher self. Someone may ask, let's talk about it. Well, Maurice, Mac, like how do I function in the higher self? How do I not become conquered by my lower self? And my thing is, daily you are either feeding your flesh, being your lower self, or your spirit, or being your higher self. You're feeding either one of those daily. If you're listening to a lot of music that is very destructive, it's always talking about killing or exploiting somebody or robbing somebody or bringing somebody some type of harm, that's gonna feed your lower self. If you're watching a bunch of movies that are very violent, hypersexual, same with the music. It's gonna feed your lower self. If you're watching a lot of a lot of BS reality TV, you're feeding your lower self. You go into social media, and you're always following like this gossipy stuff that really doesn't have any lasting value. If you're sharing stories or reading stories that are always just negative, you're feeding your lower self. By what you choose to feed yourself, higher self or lower self, whatever you choose to feed, it impacts you physiologically. The books you read, the things you watch on TV, the conversations you have. If it's low vibrational, it is going to have a negative impact literally on the cells in your body. But on the flip side of that, if you're watching things that are more productive, like things that are motivational, learning how to grow in different areas in your life, spiritually, physically, emotionally, working out, these things can have a positive impact on you physiologically, psychologically, and it can build your higher self. If you really go back and look at a lot of the things that Nipsey talked about, Nipsey was big on self-education, learning about money. One of the things Nipsey would always talk about was mastering your energy. If you want to put out good energy, you want to put out energy, and we said higher self serves, it grows, it expands. If you want to put out that good energy, you have to make a conscious effort to want to do that, and you also have to feed your mind things that are centered around growth and development. But again, and Nipsey said, if you want to be on the BS, you want to be on the negative energy, focus on that. You want to be lower self, focus on that. Be egotistical, be selfish, put out bad energy. You have the choice. The yin and yang. You have that decision to make. And again, this is not easy. It takes concentrated effort. I can honestly say that I have invested a lot in my spiritual growth, my intellectual growth. I'm not where I want to be, but I thank God I'm definitely better than where I was. You know what I'm saying? Um, but yeah, Farrakhan again. Let's get back to Farrakhan. Farrakhan spoke to that. Farrakhan essentially again said how Nipsey rose from that lower level thinking, and became his higher self. Functioned from his higher self. He arose and became a spiritual man. Um, and my thing is this: they always say, we always talk about devils. White people are the devil. Uh, such and such is the devil. Watch out for the devil. My thing is we give the devil too much credit. The devil that you need to handle is that devil within, that lower self. You need to confront that devil daily. I think, God and the devil, I don't think they're necessarily just metaphysical things. I think they are. I think they're spiritual realities, but I think people need to also understand that that dialectic devil God, it dwells within us, and is contingent upon what we choose to feed. So pay attention to your thoughts. Pay attention to what you're feeding yourself, the conversations you're having, what you're feeding your mind. But yeah, peace and love. I could be here all day talking about this. Peace and love. Like, share, comment, subscribe. Follow the movement on Instagram, MacTV_82. Yeah, follow the Facebook page, MacTV. If there's any suggestions, you can email me, get at mactvpodcast@gmail.com. I'll put a link in the description, put a link to the Farrakhan speech in the description. I'll put a link to one of Nipsey's interviews where he talked about mastering your energy. I gotta find it. I'll find it. But yeah, peace and love. Peace and love to all. Mac TV, music, art, culture, knowledge. Live from the Dogon. Peace and love. Be blessed.